Okay, so one of the biggest mistakes you can make when you're moving someplace is realizing your commute is a lot longer after you move in. Okay, I did this, so I'm sharing this from experience, and I've seen many other people do this as well. And, this is the thing to keep in mind if you're moving to Chandler. Phoenix Metro is huge. It's the fifth largest metro area in the United States, and it's very much a sprawl. It's very spread out. So a lot of times people really underestimate its size and don't realize how long it's going to take to get from A to B. And overall, I would say our infrastructure, our highway system is actually pretty great. It's a perfect beltway system, but we live in a car-driven city or a metro area. There's not really much public transportation at all. For the most part, everyone is driving, so everyone's on the road at very similar times. So it's just really important to understand how long it's going to take you to get from Chandler to wherever you're going. So today we'll talk about how long realistically is it going to take you to get to some of the major work hubs or other, everyday destinations that people often go to, or even, some other like cities or, weekend adventure trips in Arizona, like Sedona or Flagstaff. And if you don't know me, I'm Courtney Strzelczyk. I'm a local real estate agent here in the East Valley, and I created this channel to really serve as a guide into what the East Valley looks like and hopefully give you some insight whether certain areas work for you or not. So if you're interested in moving to this area or learning more about the Phoenix East Valley, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. So before we jump into commute times, let's just talk about generally the shape of Chandler. Okay, I'm going to look at a map for a minute. For the people that are not map people, hang on. We'll get away from this. We won't focus on this too long. But Chandler is kind of an oddly shaped city, if you will. So we're going to break it into four main sections. The first section is going to be more of that north downtown Chandler area. This is where downtown Chandler is. And then we're also going to have the west wing. This is I kind of joke that it's the forgotten part of Chandler. It's directly south of Tempe. But this is, one section of Chandler that is going to have a little bit different commute pattern than some other regions. And then we'll talk about South Chandler. So South Chandler is going to be below the 202. So if you're familiar with Chandler a little bit, this is going to be like Ocotillo area. And then we're going to talk about South Chandler. Okay, this is like right above the reservation. You're far away from the 202. It's going to look a lot different for commute time. So it is kind of its own little pocket of Chandler, if you will. Now, highway access is key. That's going to be one of the biggest things that will impact your commute time. And the beautiful thing about Chandler is really with the exception, I would say, of Tempe, but of all the East Valley cities, you have the most options for highways. You have the 101, which is going to lead you up to Scottsdale. This is often a common route to the airport as well. You have the 202 Belt Loop, which will take you from east to west. This can also be an alternate route to get to the airport or Central Phoenix. And then if you're on the west side, you have Highway 10. This is really our major highway that goes through the heart of Central Phoenix. And then you also, even though it's not up against the 60, that is another highway, east-west highway that will take you to a lot of places in the Phoenix East Valley. Now, another beautiful thing is that we have HOV lanes, okay? So if you have, it's set periods through, Monday through Friday, times that we have a little more traffic, right? But if you have two or more people in your vehicle, you can take the HOV lane. Now, the beautiful part about the HOV lane is, yes, the lane does move a little bit faster during heavy traffic times, but the best part is when you're going from one highway to another during that interchange, a lot of these highways have HOV merge lanes from one highway to the other, and that's where traffic gets really congested and you can cut a lot of time off. So if you have another person you can drive with during those heavy traffic times, it's great. Now, before we talk about actual commute times and what to expect, definitely want to talk a little bit about traffic patterns here in the metro area. So for the most part, rush hour times, the worst times in the morning is going to be between 6 and 8. You will definitely see even as early as 5:30 that the traffic picks up. And then, depending on the day, I would say, you can see traffic stay pretty bad until 8:30. But for the most time, 6 to 8 is really the heat, the most amount of cars on the road. And then the evenings, the worst times are going to be between 3:30 and 6. Again, some days you may see traffic start a little bit before 3:30. And then other times, I mean, after 6 o'clock, you're still going to see more cars on the road than, like 2 in the afternoon or 1 in the afternoon. But it's usually flowing pretty good. And, generally, like when I give you these times from A to B, for the most part during rush hour, you can expect to add 10 to 15 minutes to these commute times. Now, if there's a really horrible accident or maybe there's some construction, you could expect to have a little bit more time added or tacked on to these times than just the 10 to 15 minutes. But for the most part, I would say like when I moved to Phoenix, I was actually really impressed with how, even if there's an accident, as long as someone's not like seriously hurt, it's cleaned up pretty quickly. Where I've been in other areas where that was not the case. If there was an accident, like the rest of the afternoon, evening was going to be horrific on that highway. And a lot of people do ask me, how bad is the traffic here? And, that's really a relative term depending on where you're coming from. I found when I moved here, I was like pleasantly surprised. I did understand that it was a large city and I had lived in other large cities that just didn't have as organized of an infrastructure. So I was pleasantly surprised. But in full transparency, I've also had a lot of clients here who are like, this is terrible. People drive too fast. There's so many cars. Your highways have 5 lanes. And we're a little bit more frustrated. So I think it just depends where you're coming from. But if you're coming from another like major city, particularly like Southern California, you're probably going to be pleasantly surprised. So let's talk about realistic commute time. So the number one area people want to know often is how far are you from Sky Harbor Airport? Okay, so the north part of Chandler, close to that downtown area, you're going to be about 20 minutes away. So this is probably going to be one of the closest locations. So if you want to be closer to Sky Harbor, you probably want to stay more in this north part of Chandler or that west part as well. It's going to be 18 or 20 minutes, depending how close you are to a major freeway. So that's just going to impact your drive time because, and as a rule of thumb, the closer you are to like an entry point for one of the highways, the less your commute time is going to be. Because if you're on surface streets, the regular grid roads, those roads, like if you're on that for 3 miles, that can tack on easily like 10 minutes to your commute. Now, if you're on the south side of Chandler, so that area, not all the way south, but south of the 202, you still have that access point to a highway. So you're looking about 25-ish minutes. And then if you're on the south side and you're far away from a highway to get to the airport, you're looking at could be a little bit over 30 minutes. And like I mentioned a moment ago, if it's during rush hour, easily add on 10 to 15 minutes to each of those commute times. Now, the other area people often ask me is more of central Phoenix. A lot of people go here for work, but I also know a lot of people go there for sports events, or there's tons of different, bars, festivals, events, restaurants. There's a lot of good restaurants in central Phoenix, actually. So it is good to know approximately how far away you are from this part of town, whether you work there or not. But this is really going to be 5-6 minutes past the airport. So North Chandler, about 25 minutes. That west part of Chandler, 20 to 22 minutes. South Chandler, right below the 202, about 30 minutes. And then the far south Chandler is going to be about 35 minutes. And then Scottsdale is another area a lot of people go to regularly for work or for leisure. And Scottsdale is a very vertically shaped city, north to south. But if you're trying to go to more Old Town area, or Fashion Square, it's going to be very, very similar commute times as Central Phoenix. It's pretty much the same distance away. However, if you're more on the north part of Scottsdale, or you want to go to the north part of Scottsdale, maybe you want to go on a hike to Pinnacle Peak, that is going to be much farther. Probably going to add another 30 minutes depending on where you are. So that's just one thing. When people say Scottsdale, usually they're referring to Old Town or Kierland area. But if you are one of those people that's referring to North Scottsdale, you just realize that's really far on the outskirts of the Phoenix metro area. Scottsdale kind of has weird city limits. And more recently, I've had a handful of clients who actually are considering Chandler, but they're planning on working more in the Elliott corridor area or towards Mesa Gateway. Haven't seen that a lot, but it has popped up more frequently. So if, that's a complete different destination, that's on the east side of the East Valley. So for commute times, going to look a little different, but the north part of Chandler is 20 minutes. west side of Chandler, 25, South Chandler below the 202, 25 minutes. And then the far south side, it really just depends how far east or west you are, but probably going to be like 25-ish minutes. But let's talk about like fun adventure trips or like weekend ventures, day trips, that sort of thing. So Sedona. It's going to be a little over 2 hours, like 2 hours and 15 minutes. I would highly recommend not driving up to Sedona Friday at 5 p.m. because I-17, that main highway that takes you from Phoenix to Sedona, gets really backed up. And it's going to take you longer than 2 hours and 15 minutes. And the other thing too, is if you're coming back Sunday afternoon, particularly when the weather's really nice and everyone's going to Sedona, you could get stuck in traffic as well. They did actually create some lanes that change direction depending on time of day. So that hopefully will help with some of the congestion. But I've been stuck on that I-17, like a parking lot on a Sunday afternoon, and it's not fun when you have to go to work the next day. You don't want to do that. So try to avoid those like Friday afternoon, evening, Sunday drive times, and you'll be able to keep around that 2 hour and 15 minutes. Flagstaff, a little bit further north of Sedona. So you're going to have the kind of the same traffic patterns. But if you are driving up a time where there isn't traffic, you're looking at about 2 hours and 35 minutes. And then Sholo. A lot of people don't know about Sholo that don't live here, but this is actually, it's in the White Mountains on the northeast side. You're almost like going towards New Mexico. High desert, so it's much cooler. It's usually about 20 degrees cooler than Phoenix. And there's beautiful pines, there's lakes. It's not quite as like developed, or the city's not near as big as like Flagstaff, but a great place to go in the summer months, and it's a little less crowded. And that's going to be about 3 hours. If you're on the very south side of Chandler, it's going to take you a few minutes longer, but for the most part, it's about 3 hours. And there's actually 2 different routes to go there. So if they're doing construction on one route, you have an alternative route to go. So you just check that out before you actually drive up there, see which route is the best option for that day. And then, of course, if you're like looking for more of a lake activity, Roosevelt Lake, a huge lake, that's about an hour and 45 minutes. But if you want something closer, Swahara Lake is about 50 minutes, a little less than an hour. And that's the one I would say I go to the most often because, first off, it's beautiful. It's really, really pretty around there. A little bit smaller of a lake, not as big as Roosevelt, but it's easier to get to. So you can easily justify a day trip there. Whether you're like, you can rent a pontoon boat, there's paddle boards. It's just a great, great lake. There's hiking around the lake too. It's a beautiful spot. If you like outdoor stuff, you need to go there at some point. And then of course there's South Mountain as well. I would say this is our, for the East Valley, this is going to be the most accessible mountain range or hiking area. And it's going to be about 20 minutes if you're on the south side of Chandler, add another maybe 5 minutes to it. But that's actually directly south of Phoenix, South Mountain, but great trail system. And then the Pima Canyon Trailhead is the one trailhead that you'll want to go if you're going here. Just the most easily accessible to most parts in the East Valley. And I do want to make a note. I see this a lot on the comment section of like Instagram or other social media platforms. And a lot of people will say recommend certain cities if you want a shorter commute time. And I would say this is not really a good rule of thumb or best practice because there are certain areas of Chandler, even though Chandler in theory is a little bit closer to central Phoenix, there are certain parts of Chandler that are going to take much longer than certain parts of Gilbert. Like South Chandler is going to be much further away from Sky Harbor than North Gilbert. So just kind of keep that in mind. And when you're don't completely discount a city just because it's someone told you on social media that it's too far away. It's really important what part of the city that you're in because these cities are huge. Chandler and Gilbert and, Mesa, these are all almost 250,000 people in each of these cities. So it really just depends. And if you want to know more about living in a certain area and, the process of buying a home, I do have a link below where you can schedule a call with me. I would be happy to, tailor a conversation specific to your needs. And I also have a full playlist here if you want to learn more about Chandler. A lot of good stuff in here. Thank you so much for your time and have a fantastic day.